Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome to our trailer discussion on the latest trailer that's literally hit probably within the hour. This is, of course, Denis Villeneuve's 2020 epic sci-fi film Dune. Has a huge fan base, and we have already seen the trailer, so this isn't going to be like a trailer reaction or anything like that, but we are going to provide our thoughts on it and hopefully have a conversation with you guys in the comments as well. So we're fresh off this trailer. And I mean, I don't know if you're in the same boat as me, George. I believe you are, because we've had a little bit of a discussion about this film and everything. I'm going into this completely cold. I know that Dune's a thing. I have never read the original novel. I haven't seen the original film from 1984, although I know that it has got some quite negative reception. So for me, this is sort of my entry into the world of Arrakis and everything that goes with it. So I went into this trailer completely cold.
I am the exact same boat here. I've never read it. Me and you were very interesting. I think we've had two big franchises where we always say in the book, in the book, in the book. I've had that for Harry Potter. You've had that for Game of Thrones, and it's been a beautiful dynamic. And we're sat here tonight knowing it's just us two that hasn't read the book. However, I have a copy in my hand. I'm going to get cracking on this. I picked it this week. We're both aiming to have read this / listen to this by December. That's the first thing we want to say, because I'm invested in this. But yeah, I know next to nothing. I knew of the cast. I knew of a few things, and I knew of worms. I knew there was a giant worm. Yeah. Couldn't tell you anything else. I couldn't tell you character names, house name, planet names. A good friend of mine is very much into this, so that's been a great guide for learning little bits as the months have gone by. But ultimately, we're here for the trailer. And before the trailer came out, it was meant to come out at 5. It basically did like a 10-minute feature on Twitter, which was really cool. They had the whole cast on like a Zoom call. It was pre-recorded, talking about the film being on set. So there's a couple of things I've took away from that we'll talk about as we kind of go over it. But I think it's kind of weird, but we're not doing a review, but it feels like it. Heading into this, so I think the big thing for this is Denis Villeneuve. I think he is one of the best working directors today. He's very much under the radar. I wouldn't say he's a household name, not yet. Certainly he's the people that know film. Now, I've only seen, I think, 4 or 5 of his films. I've still not seen Arrival, which is probably the biggest one I've not seen, and Prisoners. No, I have seen Prisoners, the other one that came out the same year. Anyway, so whenever I've seen his films, I've kind of really enjoyed them, and it feels different. He feels like he's got his own style, but he seems to get the best out of the actors. So I think when his name got attached to this project, he originally was up for Bond. People that watch a channel regularly knows that I'm a massive Bond fan, and not to say I was disappointed, but I kind of thought, well, he's meant to be doing this massive adaptation of Dune, so why is his name in the Bond conversation? And ultimately, he didn't have to pull out. He said, no, I'm not doing Bond. I'm adapting this Dune film. And that goes all the way back to sort of 2017 way. Like, he would have been on pre-production in this. So to me, his name right now is one of the biggest draws to this. I don't think many directors would have the... I'm not even going to say would have the name to pull this off. I think Warner Brothers, to their credit for a change, have funded a big film, a very big risk, on someone that's not a household name. We've just spent a month talking about Nolan, and we know straight away, he's a household name. He wins Oscars, what his films do. Everyone knows him. You slap his films and everyone's seen them, and he can get over 200 million budget. But this is almighty, and I'm really excited because it might make him a household name. It makes me want to watch more of his films. That's my kind of impressions of Villeneuve, that from what I've seen of him, I think he's very, very talented.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same boat as well. Villeneuve's quickly becoming one of my favorite directors in the business. All of his films are very, very interesting. He's touched on sci-fi before with the likes of Arrival. I know you haven't seen that one. I really do thoroughly recommend Arrival. I think it's a fantastic science fiction film, kind of based in our world. And this is another adaptation he's doing. He's proven himself with sequels. And whilst I wasn't the biggest fan of the sequel to Blade Runner, I think as a film, it's fine. I just always think that Blade Runner wasn't really a film that needed a sequel. He has proven himself with a concept of a sequel like that. So he's got a proven track record as a director, and the direction looks completely on point from this trailer as well, especially the cinematography as well. So I was checking the cinematographer. Cinematographer is Greg Fraser, who actually did the cinematography to Rogue One, I found out. And I thought that was an absolutely stunning looking movie. Say what you want about the film, I still do enjoy Rogue One for what it is. But visually, it looked incredible, and there's some absolutely breathtaking shots of this thing. The deserts of Arrakis, you've got like loads of sunsets and clouds and cliffs and everything. You actually watched the behind the scenes featurette that was attached to the trailer. I didn't. I've only seen the trailer for this thing, but you were telling me about how so much of it is shot in camera. Yes, you do get some visuals. Of course you are with a thing like this. It's unavoidable to have that, but filming so much of it practically in camera will really make this film age well and just look fantastic. And we always say like a world that's lived in and everything, but you are kind of getting those Star Wars vibes from like A New Hope, the very sort of deserty, you know, the towns, the culture and everything like that. And I think that is genuinely going to make a very, very big difference. I think you would take away a lot of that tangibility had this all been shot with digital. Of course, you've still got your giant CGI worms in there. And I was holding out in the trailer for the worms. Again, that's like one of the only shreds of information that I know about Dune is that they ride these giant worms through the desert, and that's the only thing that I knew about it. Because I know when the third Hobbit movie came out and there was those, I don't know if you remember it, those worms that come bursting out of the ground, a lot of people were drawing reference to Dune and saying that Peter Jackson took more than a bit of inspiration from those.
I have not seen The Hobbit since the cinema, so I've completely not. All I remember is Billy Connolly. Very quickly, you mentioned Greg Fraser. I thought cinematography looks stupendous. He is doing Batman next year as well. He's gone Dune to Batman, and obviously Denis Villenueve used, oh my god, how have I forgotten his name, for his previous film. So this is his first film not using the, I don't want to say the cinematographer of Blade Runner, the one that finally won his Oscar. He's been nominated about 20 times.
I'm on it. I know who you mean. Roger Deakins. Jesus Christ. There we go.
So I think when he's had someone like Roger Deakins on his side for a couple of years, he has to try someone new. And it looks like he's nailed it. Greg Fraser, he may have also worked on one of the Apes films. I would need to check that. But mentioned being in camera, I don't normally do notepad things, but I've got one quote which stuck with me. And he said that Jaws wasn't filmed in the swimming pool in terms of being on set, being on location, because it would be easy to go to a green screen studio, chuck a load of sand on the floor, but you're going to know it's a studio. It's going to make it harder for the actors. If they're in deserts in the middle of nowhere, some of the, maybe it's action set pieces, everything feels more real. And I think the actors can take so much more from that. And then they obviously, as we mentioned, they went on to say as well that they only used 2 green screens in the entirety of this. Rebecca Ferguson did an interview. She said that the sets were so big that she was getting lost when she was walking in them and stuff. And it makes me sort of jump back to Blade Runner ever so quickly, of when he had that incredible set for the Jared Leto, like the weird shrine in Blade Runner 2049. And the whole thing, it looks like an event film. And that word is used so much these days. And I'm going to make a comparison, which I know you don't want me to say.
I'm prepared for it.
Everyone's saying it. And I'm going to look at this from an angle that someone that has read neither book. Everyone's saying this is like Lord of the Rings, but sci-fi. So obviously I've seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the extended, and I do very much enjoy them. I understand the idea of it. Like, oh, it's the unfilmable book that we don't think can be done, yet some filmmaker's going to do it, and someone's taking a big risk and adapting this to the screen. And I think these comparisons getting richer because there's an ensemble cast, because it's a very, very, not just famous book, but highly not established, respectful book. The source material is not something you can afford to get wrong. And I think Dune is in the same vein as that. I said, as someone that's an outsider that hasn't read the books for either franchise, if I'm completely in the wrong. But it seems like we're going to have our ensemble cast. We're going to shoot on our locations in this country that's not Hollywood. And certainly there is a comparison there, but it's a bizarre comparison because A, this film's not out. Lord of the Rings has been out for 20 plus years. I can imagine Lord of the Rings was still a very, very big risk up until that first trailer and first film came out. See, I wouldn't remember back then. But in terms of my sort of, not generation, but in terms of my lifetime, I couldn't tell you the last big event film that was a book adaptation. Of course, Deathly Hallows Part 2 was the be-all and end-all, but Harry Potter was a very new concept, even when it had its adaptation in the year 2001 into Philosopher's Stone. It was sort of a couple of years after the book. This has had like a 50-year plus legacy, a gazillion sequels. And it feels like there's a weight to it. Certainly the fan base, obviously there's a lot of Dune fans. There's a very big fan base for that. There are very high expectations. And it kind of leads me back onto the director about if someone's going to give this a go, then as someone that's seen a couple of those films, I would trust him with source material for something different. He didn't feel phased out when you watch Blade Runner. I don't think he just copied it. He didn't make it exactly like the old one for the sake of it. He kind of put his stamp on it. He presented his ideas whilst paying respect to the previous film and continued that story. So that's my kind of opening tidbit. I know the comparison is very different because obviously Lord of the Rings is your favorite films as well. And I know that this is very different, but do you see where I'm coming from? That
I know what you mean from the lore, like the expansive lore and everything. And, I mean, the Dune franchise is like comprised of 237 books. It's not that much, but there's a lot of books, and even ones that were written posthumously. There's comics, short stories, even some dating as recent to 2016. Like, this thing is still going. They're still adding to the lore and everything like that. So, as far as I know, I think because they're working on 2 films, aren't they? They're splitting what we think the first book into 2 films, which is probably the right thing to do. I just saw how thick the book was when you picked it up there. And yeah, that definitely seems like a book where you're probably going to have to split it into 2 films. But it doesn't, and especially with Villeneuve directing as well, it doesn't seem like it's done as a cash grab. It doesn't seem like it's a Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2, where you could very easily have that be one film. You cut the filler out of the first one, you cut down on the action in the second film, you mash it into one. And or like the final Twilight, for example, Breaking Dawn, where you can clearly tell it's done for financial gain. Why make one film that's going to make $1 billion when you could make 2 films that are going to make $1 billion? This feels like there is definitely way more than enough source material there to work with 2 films. And this thing's going to be like 2 hours 40, 2 hours 50 or something like that, probably, maybe even pushing 3 hours. I don't know. So I'm looking forward to it in that sense, and I think that it's definitely in the right hands with the director and the crew that are working with this thing. The cast as well is vast, some very, very famous names in there, so definitely working with a lot of talent. I will say, though, as a first trailer, and this is coming from someone who knows nothing about the story, the trailer didn't blow me away. Visually, it looks stunning, and I do like that the final shot is just seeing how vast the scale of these worms are. And that did. Now I know that it's the cinematographer of Rogue One. Now I know this is probably more of a Gareth Edwards thing because we saw that with his direction with Godzilla, but maybe that is also translated in the cinematography. That sense of scale that you get with Rogue One, when you see the death. Yeah, there's the shot right there. That's like the money shot of the trailer. You really just take in the enormity of these things, and it looks incredible. So, from a visual standpoint, it's definitely got me on board. The story itself and the characters, because I haven't read the book, it feels like I am trying to play catch up, and I don't know if the trailer does an effective job of really showcasing everything. I'm sure there's a lot in there that they need to get across. There's probably loads of characters, as we can see from the cast. There'll be loads of subplots and incidental characters and everything. It mostly just looks like, from what I can gather, there's like a military kind of force, and it's like a rebellion, almost like a revolt trying to take control of the desert of Arrakis. That's the general gist, and that's probably very much simplified from my takeaway from the trailer. But that's all I'm really getting. I know that it's a huge tentpole film. I know that it's going to make an absolute killing. I know that it does have that fan base, and it is going to be, well, I mean, it's the December slot, isn't it? So that's not to be trifled with when you've got a film in the December slot. As a first trailer, it didn't blow me away, but I'm still going to go and see this thing regardless because I am intrigued by it. And just, there's probably so much more that isn't in the trailer that is in the final film. And I think I am going to listen to the audiobook of this thing. I don't want to go into this completely cold. And I think the only other film that comes to mind of sort of like recent memory where I've purposely gone out of my way to read the source material before watching the film was Watchmen, where I bought the graphic novel before seeing that film. And that definitely did help me with my experience watching that film, and I'm sure this is probably going to be the same case as well. I'm sure it is going to be accessible for new audiences. All films genuinely are, but if you do have that love or knowledge of the book, you're just going to have, there's going to be more to glean from it. You're going to notice things that other people don't notice, and you're going to be more conscious of the changes. So it is definitely one that I'll be reading before it comes out in December.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because you mentioned last book. I remember reading Ready Player One. Now, I think I'm a bit weird when it comes to books. I tend to watch the first trailer and then read the book by the time the film comes out, just so in my head I have an image of characters and voices and stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as a kid, I saw the first Harry Potter film before I read the book, and obviously then you read the books, etc., etc. Never read Lord of the Rings. I did read The Hobbit after the first 2 films and before the third. Very different experience, but
so different.
It was here's a short book and here's 3 long films. But anyway, this is Dune. I'm looking forward to reading this because you mentioned the cast. I think that's a massive thing for this. Now, I'm actually going to bring up a comment first thing. Claudius put only in theaters. We'll see. So this is the unofficial Warner Brothers tagline. only in theaters. Now, in the online interviews, they had, oh my God, I've forgotten his name, one of the best stand-up comedians who did the panel at Star Wars Celebration last year. He's a roundtable. It's really embarrassing. I forgot his name anyway. He kind of ended it with only in theaters, and it was like, oh, like that's the Warner Brothers like closing statement. And obviously, we don't know where the world's heading in December, but I hope to see this at a cinema. This is one that they're not just talking about. Again, going back to that comparison for Lord of the Rings, I think one of the only other reasons this is getting compared to is that this is one of the early Oscar favorites. And I think because Lord of the Rings was a franchise with a December release date that did get nominated for Oscars, it again puts unnecessary comparison into the fact, oh, look, it's an Oscar film in December that's a book adaptation. It's Lord of the Rings. It's unfair on the film.
And Warner Brothers could do with another big tentpole film as well. So
exactly.
They got that going for it as well.
But a big thing I want to bring up is Timothée Chalamet, because he has a humongous fan base, and I'm not understating that in the least. I've not seen many of his work. He was Incredible and Beautiful Boy. That's who obviously was in Stellar as a kid. We spoke about in our video, and I've seen him in a couple of other things, and I think he's an outstanding actor. But I've never seen him as this. Oh, who's in Little Women, wasn't he? Of course he was.
Yeah.
But he doesn't strike to me as a blockbuster actor. I can't see him signing a 10-picture Marvel contract. I can't see him striking a Dune Eternity contract. I think this is going to be an adaptation of the two films, and that'll be it. I can't imagine Denis Villeneuve wanting to sit around and sort of not waste years, but he'll want to kind of do this as his big project over X amount of years and move on. I think Timothée Chalamet is the same. He mentioned in his interview that he hadn't read the book. He was attracted to this by Denis Villeneuve being directing. And I think that's a really big thing. And then he read the book off that and obviously fell in love with it. So Timothée Chalamet is someone that's starting to grow on me a lot more. I think he's a very, very talented actor that he's going to be around for quite a while as well. So I'm very intrigued to see him leading a big blockbuster. However, the one thing that's drawing me more to this more than anything is a certain Oscar Isaac, because not to moan on a film from last year, but even Daisy Ridley's made comments today. Oscar Isaac is an outstanding actor. When the Star Wars cast was announced, he was the one I was most excited by. He'd been in a couple of big films. Inside Llewyn Davis was outstanding. I absolutely adore that film. And when they released that first photo of him a couple of months back, literally in the power armor, which he's wearing there, it just kind of hit me what an absolute hero. And obviously, not that I'm aggrieved we didn't get to see that in some other films of his recently, but he's someone from his experience on a big film is put off. Seems like he'd be put off doing big films. And here he is doing another one, but the scale, the cast, the costume, the design, everything, he just looks like a warrior. He doesn't look like Oscar Isaac. He looks like a character in a film. And I think that's a really big thing for me, that it detracts it. So, again, I don't know anything about this. I don't know his role. They mention he's a kind of king, or he's the father of Timothée Chalamet, but he looks like he is going to be one incredible machine. And that's also going to push me on to the legendary Dave Bautista, aka Drax the Destroyer, aka
he does look like a Sontaran. You're right.
Yeah, for the Doctor Who fans, he looks like a Sontaran. Again, I don't know much about his character, but he's a villainous guy. We know that Stellan Skarsgård's playing the main villain, who has a very creepy penguin vibe in the shot here. And apparently, again, it's really hard for us to talk about because we don't know, and it's going to really excite me to read this and find out, because now I'm getting these images of people. They're talking about houses and where they fit in the world building. And I know I'm completely off tangent now, but I think the big things with films like this is we don't get world building anymore. Not to say on Star Wars again, but obviously the recent films, we haven't had that. I know they haven't had time and it's been different, but you go to Game of Thrones, and the beauty of the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones was it felt like a real world. It felt like you were north of the country, north of the wall, bottom. Felt like everything felt geographically perfect. And I want to get a scale of that world building, because films don't do it. When people think of world building today, I know I'm completely off tangent now, you think of the MCU, because they've built an incredibly successful franchise model that has built a world in its own right via crossovers. But we don't have that sense of let's go somewhere completely new.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big thing that's attracting me to this, because I'm on the same path as you. It wasn't the best trailer I've ever seen, but there was enough in there for me to sit back and think, this looks like it's going to be an experience. This looks like an event film, and I need to know as much as I can now. I'm just going to bring up one other shot in the sense of scale again. Even the armies, the desert, the designs, it
and
feels...
the sandcrawlers.
Yeah. Wow. It is worth mentioning as well, the Denis Villeneuve said in interviews that because obviously Star Wars took so much from Dune, as it did take things from many sci-fi franchises. He says doing a desert planet is a lot harder than it would have been back then.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Very, very good point, even in terms of character design, scavenger type costumes. And it's going to be interesting how he approaches this, because the famous comparison I've seen online is this is Star Wars for adults, which, someone that's wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, ironic actually right now. It makes me want to see more sci-fi because I love my Star Wars. But if we're going to get something similar, like a new franchise in space in these new worlds, then why not? Because studios don't take risks on things like this. And if we're going to get a director make a fine film in this new world, then I'm all for what's going to come from it. I mean, they've already announced a TV series they're going to be working on. It's going to be a prequel to the film. I'm not sure what the source material is on that, but it's going to. There's no date, no filming or anything, but Denis Villeneuve is going to direct the pilot. It's the same writer that's done the adaptation of the book into the film. However, he's had to stop working on the TV series to focus on scripting part 2 because they didn't film them back to back. This is very much we filmed the first one over X amount of years and we're going to come back for the second one probably in a year or two. Very awkward timing to be doing 2-parters right now, but
I mean, I don't know if that's the reason why they've split it into 2. I mean, it's probably good in hindsight that they've done it that way. I do think that a lot is to be gained, though, from filming things back to back. I think that it immerses your actors in this world for a considerable amount of time. They can fully get to grips with the characters. They don't bomb off and do other roles. Not to say, I mean, they're actors, for God's sake. This is their job. They could easily snap back into a character however many years after. But I do think a lot is aided and helped from filming things back to back. Maybe that's my bias with stuff like Lord of the Rings. And I guess we'll see how good Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5 turn out. But going back to your thing about the world building, I honestly think it's a question of time in films. I don't think there's any excuse. I think that any film can do it, but I think that, I mean, it sounds completely pointless saying this, but the longer you have with a film, whether it's a very long film, whether it's a trilogy of films, whatever it happens to be, a saga, you're naturally spending more time in that world. You can cover more things, especially with a TV show like Game of Thrones you mentioned, or a recent fantasy one that I can think of, because it's usually the fantasy and sci-fi genre that do have this vast world. Is like the Dark Crystal TV series on Netflix, for example. You have the original film tried to create this world and it did a very good job, but it was limited to like an hour and a half to 2-hour film. But then when you get a TV series and you have, 10 hours to play with, there's a lot more you can do with it. You can go more in depth with it. And if each of these films are going to be 3 hours a piece, that's 6 hours. I definitely think like they'll be able to cover a lot. And I think it'll be a case of that book thing as well. There obviously will be things in the book that they won't be able to translate to screen, whether that be a time thing or whether something is more suited for the medium of a book. You can spend more time with it and develop it than you can in a visual medium. So, but I do think that book is definitely going to help. And going back to the cast that you mentioned, Oscar Isaac looks like he's fresh off the planet Krypton, doesn't he? With the shoulder pads and everything. So very much looking forward to seeing the characters. I will say that Timothée Chalamet didn't really blow me away in this trailer. He is sort of that very gruff voice, monotone, stoic protagonist, but judging by some of the comments, which I'm going to click over and bring up on the screen in a second, it seems like that is the tone of this world, of these characters. And if that's the case, then that's not really a criticism. But I'm going to bring up Paul's comment first. So we have a comment from Paul Curlin who says, I am a fanboy of the book Dune. This trailer hits quite a few of the points and moods that represent what I think it should be. I am hesitantly stoked, which might be my favorite comment or criticism that I've ever seen. Hesitantly stoked. I'm going to start using that myself, I think. But absolutely, it brings up the concept of the moods there. And it definitely does create that very somber tone to it. And Kelly follows that right up as well. Kelly Applin says, the trailer looks dark and mysterious with a strange religious vibe to it. But from what I gather is that the books have a lot of subplots. Absolutely. This one looks like it's going to be in depth. It looks like there's going to be a lot to take away from this thing. And where is it? Claudia's comment, I sure hope we will be able to enjoy the cinematic event in the theaters. Absolutely. I mean, this is just from the trailer alone and some of these shots. I'm sure this is going to be on IMAX and everything like that. I don't know if it was, I'm assuming it was probably filmed on IMAX. Yeah. I know a lot of films tend to be now. I know that's been sort of popularized since like 2008. Hello, Christopher Nolan. But this is absolutely a movie to see on IMAX. Like just from those landscape shots, you've got me at landscape shots. And I haven't even seen the action scenes yet. So this is definitely one that I'll be checking out on IMAX, I think. Hopefully everything's all right by then.
I'll just bring up 2 more just so we cover them. Life Brian, trailers and work for me. If I didn't know what Dune was, that wouldn't sell me on it. So that's very interesting.
I kind of agree with that. Yeah,
I'd agree on that.
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued to see what people think that aren't sort of aware of the franchise books or the filmmaker, the general audience, the most powerful audience that people don't speak about. And Claudia, I'm absolutely sold on it. First it's Dune, then Villeneuve, then Chalamet. There'll be a lot of people, I think, in very similar orders or reverse orders, but be very interesting to see this when it comes out. And I think Zendaya's got a massive fan base, which would be crazy to rule out at the same time. As a kind of not final thing, I want to bring up Hans Zimmer before I get to my probably favorite part of the trailer, or ask what the favorite part of the trailer is. So Hans Zimmer's doing this score. Now, we've just come off the back of Nolan month, and we know that he turned down Tenet because of Dune. And it's come out in an interview with Empire Magazine this week that when they were working on Blade Runner, he basically told Denis Villeneuve that if he ever wanted to do a Dune soundtrack, he wants to be the first person involved, and that he'd already apparently written some music that he would want, or an idea of what he would do for a Dune soundtrack, because he said that it was his favorite book growing up. There's a special place for it in his heart, and he will pick that project over anything else ever made. I think when push came to shove, he absolutely did it, because he turned down a Nolan film, two of the most powerful duos in Hollywood today, to do this soundtrack. Now, this trailer doesn't give us much of the Zimmer theme, whether or not he composed the music of this trailer, because sometimes trailers use different people, but certainly in yesterday's teaser, it's like a small introduction to the cast. They do a speech from the book, and then it cuts to, well, the logo. But what to me, it was the sound, the Hans Zimmer sound. The full orchestra came in. I didn't know what to expect, because I don't know what to expect from the film. But it felt sort of, I don't want to say monumentous, but big choir coming in from all angles. There wasn't the bombs. There was some of the drums, as you kind of mentioned before we hit live.
But steel drums, yeah.
I'm part of me, and that has this going, is that Zimmer's done this, and Denis Villeneuve's gone as far as to say that if Hans Zimmer hadn't have had that conversation with him, he doesn't think he would have approached Warner Brothers to do an adaptation of Dune. Of course, it would have probably been in his mind to have even had a conversation, but at a point, Hans Zimmer could partially be responsible for this film being made, which is quite a feat for a composer, albeit one of, to me, in the top two of all time. But the Zimmer stuff, when that soundtrack comes out in December, that's going to be a real big thing for me. If this is a project that he's been passionate about for most of his life as well, I think we're going to have a new not type of Zimmer, but I think we're going to have heard things that we've never heard before. I think he would have given 300% to this, so I'm very excited for that. I think he's a wonderful composer. But as a kind of final thing, as we said, we haven't read the book. We do hope to have people that have read the book with us. So I don't know if there'll be a second trailer. I can imagine they do one at the end of November.
I think there probably will be. I was going to say, I think that maybe it's usually trailer 2, not all the time, but usually trailer 2 definitely shows you a lot more, a bit more of the action, a bit more of sort of like what the story's about. The first trailer is always just to give you the mood, which it sounds like it's been very effective with, especially with fans of the book. I expect we'll definitely see a lot more in trailer 2 that might get us a bit more pumped for it than maybe perhaps this trailer in particular didn't. Absolutely.
So my final bit is going to be, do you have a favorite moment from the trailer? I do. I'm not going to say Jason Momoa.
It's the worms. I was in it for the worms, and the trailer was winding down, and I thought, come on, like it needs, all trailers end on like a big shot, don't they? Like a big talking point. And then when I saw that the sand underneath, it was like Tremors, right? The film, like the sand underneath the ground, I was like, oh, here we go. And I thought they were just going to leave it there. But then you do get the full shot of the worm. You don't see anyone riding any worms. I don't know if that's specifically just in the 80s film or if that is in the book. I think it is in the book. So they're keeping that a closely guarded secret. But it was just that final shot. It was like, okay, I'm on board for giant worms. Let's go. I've got a very simple taste. What can I say?
Worms. Oh, it feels like... Oh no! There's a comparison to something worms in the film, but I've completely forgotten.
Dumb and Dumber. I got worms.
That's the one. But one of the things that I've kind of stood out with the most for me is not Jason Momoa, because he felt great and everything. I say this. I've got a photo with him. I'm not going to say I'm not the biggest Momoa fan. I haven't seen the film Aquaman, and I didn't like him in Justice League, and he was massively overhyped in Batman v Superman. But he has charisma, and he's all over this trailer. He looks, if this guy, they build him as the best swordsman there is, basically the Khal Drogo of this. So get Khal Drogo in. I'm excited to read about his character, because I think I have a prediction in my head what's going to happen to him, but please don't comment that, people, just for spoilers for that haven't read it. But the big giveaway to me is one simple shot. And I'm a guy with simple taste like Star Wars. It was the soldiers on the like jetpacky things as he just landed with his squadron like they're about to start a fight. It was so simple. It was 2 seconds long, but I was sold because it just felt like, not a Grand Army of the Republic, but it had that scale of look at all of these, and it was just one simple shot of 5 or 6, and then it cuts to like the millions of them. So that was something for me which I just kind of took me by surprise. Like, when something so minor is like something that's really like pleasing at the same time, aesthetically it's something just clicked with that. So that's probably my final bit. But as I said, the worm bit was great because I did know about the worms. I know it's on the cover. It's really hard as someone that watched King Kong first and is scarred by the horrifying things when they eat.
Yeah.
I had Andy Serkis vibes of like run before they get your arms and your legs and your head. But no, I think that's everything I can say on Dune right now. Like I said, when there is a trailer, if the trailer 2 is big enough that we need to come back and do another video, then absolutely. Of course, we will do our spoiler review in December. Fingers crossed, December. And in December, we might be sitting here clued up and really narcissistic, like in the books.
I was going to say, don't worry, we'll do our research. We'll get the books either read or listened to on an audio book. We'll probably do a review on the 84 movie, David Lynch movie. We'll cover it all. It'll all be in December. But we're a bit unprepared right now, but we still have a couple of months and we'll get there. Absolutely.
So, as usual, we're going to wrap this up by bringing up the social media. So, if you guys love Dune, if you haven't seen us before, then check us out, subscribe, like, comment, share. It helps with the algorithm. Like I said, we want to do a Dune discussion as people that don't know it, so it's something new, something different. But if you want to find out more about what we do, and obviously the best thing to do is obviously check out our channel. We've just done a Christopher Nolan month, as we mentioned, where we covered Tenet in a lot of videos, a lot of Tenet things, a lot of Nolan things. But the best way to find out what's coming and what we're doing next is to find us on Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter @cinema_savvy, and we have a store on TeePublic with our logo below. However, we will be having a new logo we're aiming for in the next month or two, which will be very interesting. But next up is, unfortunately, not Dune. Next up is the very, very controversial Mulan film, which we're reviewing tomorrow. So if you enjoyed this, if you want to hear people rant about Mulan, whether it's the real-life behind-the-scenes dramas or the actual film itself, it's going to be a very interesting video tomorrow night, 8 p.m. GMT. So tune in for that. But again, thank you to everyone that's joined us today. We don't normally do trailer discussions, especially as a duo, so I don't normally know how this has been, but I've had a lot of fun talking something new.
Me too, yeah. And when you've got a trailer this big, and maybe if you guys like this, maybe we'll do more of these trailer discussions as and when we get these big film trailers come out. But a big thank you to everyone that's been commenting along, letting us know your thoughts on the trailer and the book. And we'll be back tomorrow for that review on Mulan. Take care, everyone.